Welcome to Center for Spiritual Living, Port Angeles, and our Talk Thursday evening. It's the first Thursday in November, and so we're starting a new theme of wholeness. And I love that we had to take this whole thing all over again, because that's how we work in wholeness. We're going to talk a lot about what that experience that we just had was all about, because that fits so neatly and perfectly into my talk tonight. But we're going to start with a song. The first verse repeats twice. So, and they all are the same after that, so you'll get a sense of it. And I invite you, as we sing this song, to just let it sort of sink into the body. When we have music, when we sing, there's a vibration that happens in our bodies. And it can be very peaceful and very grounding. And if you have any attachment about, I don't know how to sing, or I'm not very good, don't worry about it. We are not judging. We're just present to what is in each and every moment. There we go. I honor the wholeness in me. I honor the wholeness in you. I honor the wholeness in all. And I bring the wholeness home. I honor the wholeness in me. I honor the wholeness in you. I honor the wholeness in all. And I bring the wholeness home. I honor the peace that's in me. I honor the peace that's in you. Honor the peace that's in all, and I bring the peace home. I honor the joy that's in me. I honor the joy that's in you. I honor the joy that's in all, and I bring the joy home. I honor the sadness in me. I honor the sadness in you. I honor the sadness in all, and I bring the sadness home. I honor the power in me. I honor the power in you. I honor the power in all, and I bring the power home. I honor the wholeness in me. I honor the wholeness in you. I honor the wholeness in all. And I bring the wholeness home again. I honor the wholeness in me. I honor the wholeness in you. I honor the wholeness in all. And I bring the wholeness home. And I bring the wholeness home. Take a breath. So tonight is all about bringing the wholeness of all of us home into our own being. We've got some announcements of our upcoming activities. Tomorrow night is our Goofy Awkward Dance Party. And that's from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. If you like to dance, but you're worried about how you look, this is the place for you. You come and you dance however you want, and we're going to play a wide variety of music. And if you want to chair dance, that works too. Then on Saturday, we're having our Chicken and Waffles fundraiser in support of Timothy Mason and his family. We can't wait to taste these delicious chicken and waffles, and that's from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. Next Friday, on the 11th, we have what we call the No Moon Drum Circle. There are a lot of people that don't drive at night, and so we're doing a drum circle between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. in the afternoon in the big barn. If you have a drum, bring it, or any kind of noisemakers, and if you don't have one, we've got plenty. The following Friday will be game night. That's board games, card games. We play games together and socialize, and that's from 7 to 9 p.m. on the 18th. We will be taking the 25th off for the Thanksgiving break. All of these activities and events are always on our webpage, So you can always find them. There's a calendar as well. You click on that, you can always see what's coming up. My talk tonight's about wholeness, and I'm going to come at it from a couple of different directions. This idea that there is this one that is many. This oneness that we speak about, whether it's the Tao, as Robert and I spoke about earlier this week, which triggered some great thoughts in my mind, or we call it spirit, or we call it energy. It doesn't matter what we call it, but many people believe in oneness. One thing, that there's only one thing ever going on, and that there's this many multitudinous expression of this one thing. When we look out the window at the varieties of flora and fauna, when we look at the way that we all as humans are so very different, and yet there are these things that connect everything. Atoms, everything has atoms. They're all there. That somehow we're linked and connected in this thing we call the oneness, in this wholeness that is all together. I started thinking this week, and it came up in one of our conversations, about these giant entities, these giant living beings that are almost unfathomably large. We think about whales and elephants as being the largest, living things. But there are quaking aspens in Utah that are all one thing. They cover 107 acres. And it's all one tree. It's all one thing. It looks like millions of individual trees. And it's called the pando. I thought this was fascinating as I started to reach it. And that's Latin, which means I spread. Isn't that cool? So this one tree keeps cloning itself over and over and over again, and it is one entity. So that's amazing. And they say that they think it's thousands and thousands of years old. It's in danger right now because of some drought. But I have confidence that whatever's going on, it will continue to flourish. So I thought that was amazing. That's huge, 107 acres. That's really big. Then I read about mushrooms. They're even bigger. There's a particular kind of mushroom that they found in Oregon that covers 2,384 acres. That's really big. And they think that it might be up to 8,600 years old. This one entity that looks like millions over 2,000 acres, and yet it's one thing. In the Tao, they talk about the 10,000 things, because that was like a really big number. They didn't have infinity figured out yet. But it's the same idea. We are the 10,000 things. We are the expressions, the individualized expressions of this oneness. Everything is. And yet we're all connected. I love this idea where they talked about that these mushrooms and these aspens, everything is connected. What happens over here affects what happens over here. And that's the same with us. We've all heard about the butterfly theory. The butterfly flaps its wings and there's a typhoon over there. It's harder, I think, for me, it's more challenging to apply that to my daily life. Well, what happens to me? How does that affect you? How does that impact your life? Especially if you don't even know me. If we live on opposite sides of the planet. And yet, if we are all part of this oneness, this one vibration, this one energy, I picture all of life as a giant web, and that where one place is plucked, it reverberates everywhere. And so I get to choose. We get to choose, how do we want to affect the web? How do we want to be with that? Life can feel, our human life, can feel very fragmented. The idea of wholeness sometimes is hard to grasp in our everyday life. We've got work and play and things that seem spiritual and non-spiritual and money. Oh, but what about money? That's not spiritual. Well, if there's only ever one thing going on, then everything is part of this oneness. There is no fragmentation, but it can feel that way, especially right now, right before the election. It feels very fragmented in our country. People seem to have very broadly different ideas about how life should be. There's a lot of stuff being roiled up. I've talked about this a lot in the last couple of months. In speaking earlier this week with our friend Robert, I also was reminded of the yin-yang symbol. And I love this idea that it's the light and the dark together. Is there anybody that's not familiar with yin-yang symbol? It's that symbol with the light side has a little speck of darkness and the dark side has a little speck of light. That they have to exist together. And so often we want to push away the darkness. I've been doing some reading out of a book by Brene Brown. She's got several books. One of my personal favorites is a different one called The Gifts of Imperfection. This one is called I Thought It Was Just Me, but it isn't. Making the journey from what will people think to I am enough. She is what's called a shame researcher. What an interesting thing to research. And it came from her own life, her own experience of shame and how shame disconnects us from life and from each other. So I'm going to reference this book a bit tonight. She talks about the idea that connection between us is critical because we all have the basic need to feel accepted and to believe we belong and are valued for who we are. And shame disconnects us, has us feel separate. I talked a little bit about this last week, that sometimes I think our biggest fear, instead of death, taxes, or public speaking, is actually separation. Separation from ourselves, separation from each other, separation from life. And shame has us feel separate. Shame is the darkness that we have an opportunity to bring to the light so that we can see it and so we can let it go. She talks about the difference between shame and guilt, which I found fascinating. She says shame keeps us from wholeness. It keeps us disconnected, this illusion that we're separate. And guilt versus shame, she dives a lot more into other things like embarrassment and humiliation. But I specifically want to talk tonight about this difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is, I did something bad, and I can notice it, and I can shift my course and do something different. Shame is, I am bad, and there's no hope for me. Shame, she said, is very interesting because what one person might just feel guilty about or maybe a little embarrassed about, somebody else might feel deep, deep shame. And it could be a 2-minute encounter or some little thing that happened, some tiny word that was dropped into our ear as a child that had us begin to believe, I'm not okay. Not I did something that was not okay, but that I'm not okay. We've heard you're bad from some parents instead of that thing you did was bad. There's a big difference. And shame has us shut down and close off and separate. Because if I'm so terrible, I better not inflict myself on anybody else. She talks about that we need to bring compassion to shame. That our opportunity is to bring compassion to it, to our own shame and to the shame of others. And it's only through sharing our stories of shame, and that's really uncomfortable, but we get to be willing to do that. That is part of that yin and yang of wholeness. Because here in my lightness, there's this little speck of dark. And here in my darkness, there's a little speck of light. And so together, we can begin to work with our humanness, our humanity, knowing that we are all part of the spiritual oneness or the allness of life. And we can begin to honor that place in us. That's why in the song, I included sadness, And if we did a few more verses, there would be grief and rage and fear. I honor those things that are in me because we've spent, I think, far too long trying to shunt away all that part of us. And it's time to bring it home, to bring the shame home, to acknowledge that we've all felt shameful about something. And that we can let that go. We can shift it to guilt, which I can do something about. I can change course. I don't have to own this behavior as who I am, but as something I did or didn't do. Sometimes guilt is something I didn't do. She also talked a little bit about the idea that we can't shift shame. And I'll give you an example, a perfect example that, of course, showed up today. This is how life works. We begin to open up to a concept or idea, and all this stuff shows up in front of us to reinforce it. Dear Abby, from the paper. Dear Abby, I went to the market the other day, and there was a woman sitting on the sidewalk with 2 children, a boy who looked to be about 6 and a girl about 2. She was holding a sign asking for help. Parentheses, money. I wanted so badly to say something to her about what a poor example she was setting for her children by begging. It made me angry because I imagine she's using her kids as props to evoke sympathy. This is a nice area. I would think she could better present herself to her kids by looking for a job. What would have been an appropriate comment to make to her that might help her put her on the right track and show her kids how to grow up to be responsible people who work for a living? Looking out for children, Irvine, California. Dear Abby's response. I love her. Dear Looking, it's wrong to assume anything when you see someone who is panhandling. The woman you saw could have been homeless, drug addicted, short on money, or mentally ill. She could have also fled an abusive husband or partner. That's why it's inappropriate to scold or lecture a panhandler. If you had said anything at all, you might have offered that there are dozens of shelters and organizations in Irvine that help the unfortunate. And if she reached out to them, she might find the help she needs to get settled and find a job. Very practical. Well, what does that have to do with what I'm talking about? Brene Brown talks about that we can't shift shame. So what I want you to notice in this moment, when I read the first part from Looking Out for Children in Irvine, what were you thinking? Were you thinking, oh, that woman shouldn't have talked about that. She shouldn't have shamed that poor woman with her children. Of course she shouldn't say anything to her. Or were you saying, yeah, darn right, that panhandler using her kids? Well, we're now engaging in the same shame behavior, if we're doing that, that this woman was doing. And Brene Brown talks about this idea that we get to dig deep and be honest about how we might react if we were the neighbor or the friend or the person who saw this situation. How is it that we then shift the shame from the homeless person to the person who's judging them? We're again seeing that all over the country right now. We keep shifting shame around. Oh, well, this person said that, so, we better make a judgment about that. It's pointless. And our culture is so, she really, in her research, has discovered that our culture is steeped in shame. She said her biggest lesson in this, and a big awareness of it, was when she was working in a youth home. And the director said that you cannot shame or belittle people into changing their behavior. And Lord knows, I've tried. I don't know about you, but I have tried to shame or belittle somebody into changing their behavior. And I'm choosing to no longer do that, including myself. Including myself. I'm no longer going to shame or belittle myself. Oh, you better not eat that because you know you're so fat. Or you better not do that. You're sleeping in again. No. I refuse. And it's hard. It's so deeply ingrained in us. I remember as a drama teacher, I taught for 25 years in classrooms, and there were a few times where I shamed or belittled kids. I'm not proud of that. but I have to own it. I have to recognize that there's that part of me that wants to judge, or I think if I just get under their skin enough, they'll be different. I know too many people who grew up in homes where that was the method of teaching. And what I see is it never changes anything, but the person just keeps getting smaller and smaller and more separate and more removed. And there's no connection anymore. And as we heard earlier, connection is critical. Critical. We have a basic need for connection. So if there's only one thing going on, whether you call it Tao or spirit or energy or whatever, or George, whatever it is, how can we bring an awareness into our own life of this one unified wholeness? How can we begin to recognize that what I do affects you and what you do affects me if we are one? That what I call myself, I'm calling somebody else. And what I call somebody else, I'm calling myself. I'm judging that. And I get to recognize and not feel shameful when I notice I've been judgmental. It's this weird little circular thing we get to keep coming back to. So for me, the key is compassion. The Dalai Lama talks pretty much exclusively about the need for compassion in this world. Brene Brown says, compassion is not a virtue. First part of that sentence caught my attention. Compassion is not a virtue. It is a commitment. Something we choose to practice. Compassion is a commitment. Because, oh boy, there are times when I don't want to be compassionate. I want to be right. I want to have my judgments. I want to make my snide comment. And so I get to breathe. I get to take a breath. I get to say, what is it that I really want to be in this world? What is it that I really want to express in this world? What is it we want to be in this world? Well, I've said a lot of times in my life, I want to be a positive ripple, a place of love and safety and compassion where people can show up as they are, where I can show up as I am, and then it ripples from there. And it's a commitment. Last night my husband and I had a little rub, a little conflict. It was not any big deal. It was very minor, but we kind of walked away from each other in a huff. And I think at the same time, both of us stopped and took a breath and remembered, who do we want to be? And then we came back together and we had a conversation. We had compassion for ourselves and each other, and it was gone. This little thing was gone. But boy, it could have easily turned into something else. So easily. Carl Jung, the quote that we heard earlier, one does not become enlightened by just imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. We have to be willing. We get to be willing. We don't have to do anything. But you can choose. We can choose to be willing to bring up that which feels uncomfortable and shameful and embarrassing and humiliating. Bring it to the light. Recognize that this is a common thing. No matter what it is, the worst thing you could think of has been shared by somebody else on this planet, because there's a lot of us. You know, even if you killed somebody, there's somebody else that's killed somebody. And most of our shame is much smaller than that. Much smaller. And yet, how impactful. So making the darkest conscious. The latter procedure, however, is disagreeable and therefore not popular. We don't like to talk about our darkness. We don't like to bring it up. We don't like to admit our shame. When I stood up here tonight, the very beginning of our gathering, I wrote this song and I completely forgot it. And I could feel my face get hot. I could feel my heart begin to beat a little faster. I was embarrassed. I felt shame. And I can say that because it's, it's no big deal. I forgot a song. Who cares? And in another life, I might have taken that moment and said, oh, that's it. I'm never putting myself on the line like that. I'm never stepping out. I'm never going to I can't start over again. Oh, no, that doesn't look professional. There's a whole story that could have gone on 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But now, I just go, you know what? Let's just start again. Let's just start over. Let's take two. The movies are great. You can do that in the movies. You can't do that in life. But we can acknowledge, woof, I made a mistake. Let me try that again. Oh, I said something really sharp and mean. Let me just take a breath. Let's try that again. Let me do that one more time. Let me go out of the room and come back in again. Let me just take that again. What's wrong with that? Nothing. So I'm going to invite us, as I close out our talk tonight, to think about, for you, what needs to come home to you. What is it that you've pushed away, tried to shunt off into the darkness? What needs to be brought home and loved up a little bit? Had some compassion given to it. So in the song, I honor the wholeness in you. I honor the wholeness in me. I honor the peace, the joy, the sadness, the grief, the shame, the rage. So I just invite you to close your eyes if you're willing. Let's take a couple of deep breaths. And I'm just going to read the first stanza of our song. And then I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to leave a little space, and you can insert your word into that space. And then I'll come back to the wholeness. So you'll hear it 3 times. But while we're here in the quiet, in this safe space, and you don't have to say it out loud, so nobody will know except you, what needs to come home? What wants to come back to you? To be healed, to be lightened, to no longer have this subtle and subconscious power in your life. Was it something you did or didn't do, said or didn't say? Something that was said to you that shouldn't have been? I honor the wholeness in me. I honor the wholeness in you. I honor the wholeness in all, and I bring the wholeness home. I honor the blank that's in me. I honor the blank that's in you. I honor the blank that's in all, and I bring it home. I honor the wholeness in me. I honor the wholeness in you. I honor the wholeness in all, and I bring the wholeness home. Take a breath. Bring that wholeness back to yourself. Allow yourself the gift of connection. Imagine that you are that mushroom or the aspen trees connected in this giant web of life. And as we heal, as we begin to step outside of our shame, our embarrassment, our mistakes, we heal the whole organism. That is a beautiful thing. Thank you. So this is our time we do conscious giving. We participate in conscious giving in this center in many ways. We give our time, our talent, and our treasure. And just so that people know, everything that comes into us in the form of dollars goes back out it helps keep this place operating, and then we have a commitment to tithe back into the community. We tithe to our home organization a small amount, and we also tithe out into the community. Last month we gave to Healthy Families here in Port Angeles, which is an organization that helps women, battered women and children in those situations. And this last month we gave to Captain Joseph's House, which is a wonderful organization that assists Gold Star families, people who have lost someone in war, in their healing process. It's beautiful work in this town. This month, all the money that comes in November will be going to support the Chicken and Waffle fundraiser. So that'll be supporting Timothy Mason. And then next month, we're working with an organization that does work and support with people who have cancer in town. So we're doing what we can to keep our money local, which I like. And then if you have an organization that you know about, please bring it to us, because our Wisdom Council is always looking for where can we continue to give out in the world. We are firm believers that as we receive, we give, and vice versa. We're part of the flow. So if you have a gift this evening, I invite you to place it on your heart. If you're giving your presents tonight, that is plenty. And we have a little conscious giving prayer in the program. If you choose, I invite you to say it with us. I am open to give. I am open to receive. I am grateful to be in the flow of life through and as me. This month we're giving to the great pumpkin.
Does everyone know why we're giving pumpkin?
I'll explain. Just pass it along down. You can just put a little energy in there. That works too.
Yeah.
So our closing song, I invite you to join us. And if you want to stand up and boogie, that's good too. It's Something Wonderful by Jennifer Ruth Russell. She's a really lovely artist. I'm enjoying her music a lot. And the words are on the back of your program. It's a good dance tune.
Something wonderful is happening to me right now. Something wonderful. Something wonderful is happening to me right now. Something wonderful. It's happening through my mind. It's happening through my body. Right here in my heart. I let it be. Something wonderful. Something wonderful. Something wonderful is happening through you right now. Something wonderful. Something wonderful is happening through you right now. Something wonderful. It's happening through your mind. It's happening through your body. Right here in your heart. So let it be. Something wonderful. Something wonderful.
Invite you to join us after our gathering in the other room for tea. If you have some more apples left, you could probably come up with a sweet treat. This is our dance break. Cheer dance if you want to.
Something wonderful is happening through us right now. Something wonderful. Something wonderful. Something wonderful is happening through us right now. Something wonderful. Something wonderful. It's happening through our minds. It's happening through our bodies. Right here in our hearts. I let it be. Something wonderful.
Then go back to me.
Something wonderful. Something wonderful is happening to me right now. something wonderful. Something wonderful is happening to me right now. Something wonderful. It's happening through my mind. It's happening through my body.